I give everyone a moment, obviously, to filter in, and I apologize if I'm looking at a second screen over here. I'm actually looking at all of you and watching, but just getting set up here. We do a Q&A. How this session kind of goes is I put a bunch of questions in the Q&A, and the girls are able to upvote questions that they might be interested in hearing you talk about. They're also quite welcome to put questions in the Q&A themselves if there's things that they just want to ask you. And once we give the girls a chance to log on here, a few more moments, we'll get you both to describe yourselves and introduce yourselves as we go.
No one's gonna want my job when they hear how much school I had to do.
There's been a couple girls asking it several times what the process is, and I was able to find a good video from Memorial back in the fall about intake for the medical school.
Yeah.
So like in that video, one of the things they said was like, you can do music school and still absolutely do med school. So I think there's a lot of misconception around that you have to like do. And I know that you did some science degrees. So you're not the example of the person who did music, but there's definitely some misconceptions around what you have to do in order to get into med school. We're already up to 15, so that's a pretty good number. And I do want to just let the girls know who are already logged on. I am going to launch a poll later on. I think I'm going to put it at the end. So if you have the time to stick around, I'm going to stick that at the end. And why I want to put it at the end is I want you to think about it during, and you can pop your answers into the chat as well. But essentially, we're planning a provincial conference, which I hope you know about by now. And both internally and our sponsors want to know what swag you want. So that's kind of exciting. So I'm going to launch a poll with a bunch of options, no promises attached, but to get an idea of what you're interested in receiving that might be branded STEM for Girls or with some of our sponsor logos. So that might be Hydro or Husky Energy right now, or Equinor is the other one at the moment, and we're working on a few more sponsors as well. But yeah, so if you have ideas of what swag you might want to receive, you can pop that into the chat. And or prizes in general. We'll be having some games during the provincial conference. So if you're thinking, geez, I'd love to win a, I don't know, Bluetooth speaker, Boss speaker, maybe that's the thing. I don't know what's cool these days. But yeah, by all means, give us some insight. Like I said, you are the pilot group, and therefore you get your pick of what swag you want and what things you get to win. So that's, I hope, kind of cool that you get to put some input into that. And I guess with that said, so stick around for the poll at the end. With that said, I'll let these two lovely women introduce themselves. We'll start with Madison. Hopefully you might have already seen her face through the maple tapping, but have at.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Madison. So I work at Manuels River, which is sort of a conservation area, a science center, a community center. It does a whole lot of stuff. We're in Conception Bay South. And I started working there as a science interpreter, so doing pretty much strictly science outreach, science communication, science education, that type of thing. And have recently, within the past year, transitioned into being the manager of the education department there. So I get to do some working with the public and outreach, and then I also do some more sort of making sure that the whole department is working and we're all able to run our programs and work with kids and work with families and that type of stuff. So a little about me, I guess. I've only been living in Newfoundland for a couple of years now. I grew up in Nova Scotia, and I've lived in lots of different parts of Canada and been to various different parts of the world. And some of that travel was related to sort of my training and my schooling. So I have a degree in neuroscience. That was my first degree that I did right out of high school, because I thought it sounded really cool and interesting and exciting. And I was really interested in biology and chemistry, and that's what I was really good at in school. And so the people in my life sort of, they sort of figured that anyone who's good at that type of stuff and interested in that type of stuff should become a doctor. So I was being sort of funneled into the career path of becoming a doctor by all the people, all the adults in my life who saw what I was interested in and what I was good at. So I started out in neuroscience, and lots of people in neuroscience, I think, probably have ended up going on to medical school. But after that, I did a whole bunch of other stuff. I got really interested in research. I worked in various different research labs on weird and strange little critters. And I decided that my interest in biology was really more related to the natural world and animals and plants and ecosystems and all that kind of stuff. So that led me to doing a master's in conservation biology. I did some work at the Toronto Zoo. I went down to Costa Rica and did an internship on science communication there at a butterfly garden. So that it just sort of, my career path very much started out in one direction and took a 90-degree turn in another direction. And now I work more in outreach and education. So yeah, that's me, I guess, in a nutshell. And in my spare time, I like to do all sorts of outdoor activities. I like hiking, and I like foraging. I like finding edible plants out in the woods and turning them into jams and teas and wines and all sorts of things like that. So that's why I guess I came up with tree tapping, because I really like tree tapping this time of year. It's the first thing that you can really go out and find after the snow starts melting, and you have to wait a while for all the other plants that you can forage to start coming up. So tree tapping is always kind of my first go at it for the season. And so yeah, hopefully some of you guys have also been able to give that a try too. So that's me.
And with that mention of tree tapping, if anyone has questions about that too, pop that into the Q&A. If you're having trouble, then Madison is right here, right now.
Right.
You can also ask on Flipgrid. And I saw at least one member had said that she had put in taps over the weekend. So I hope the rest of you might already have taps in, but there's still plenty of time. I'm seeing it come up on Facebook a lot right now that people are just starting to tap. So
yeah, it's a good week for it this week.
Yeah. All right, Dr. Dayna Butler.
I am missing out on the tree tapping game. I'm just going to put that out there in the start. I'm Dayna. I'm a physician. I work at Eastern Health. I'm a general internist, which basically the easiest way to describe it is like a pediatrician, but for adults. So I see only adult patients in a variety of places. I work in the emergency department. So if someone's super unwell and needs to be admitted to hospital, I generally see those patients. I do some time in clinic with people that are a little bit more puzzling. Usually I sort of get questions from family doctors who maybe have some sort of diagnostic dilemma or treatment dilemma for patients, and they'll ask me about their care. And then I follow people who are admitted in the hospital as well. So that's kind of what I do. I went to MUN, and then sort of the end of my training was at Western, which is in London, Ontario. And I sort of wasn't really interested in medicine at all until I started university. I always kind of liked chemistry and bio. Never really was encouraged to pursue medicine. Saw a ton of people around me being like, we're gunning for medicine. Was like, oh, this is actually quite interesting. And that's sort of how I ended up on the path that I ended up on. I am from here in Newfoundland. I'm from CBS. I live in St. John's now and work in St. John's. And what else about me? I was interested in traveling, but that's apparently not a thing anymore. So now I cook and eat a lot, basically is my life now. I learned to crochet during the pandemic. Nothing interesting. I should get into tree tapping though. I should look into this.
Time's now.
Yeah, I can get you some taps. I still have quite a few from this program, in fact. So We'll be in contact. Yeah, perfect. That's a great start. And some girls have started to upvote, and and my cat has decided to be a pain. Okay. Let's see. Right off the bat, there was one about tapping birch trees. So what can you do with your sap water if you have tapped a birch tree?
Okay, so you can make syrup out of both of them, maple sap and birch sap. It's just a little trickier to make it out of birch. That's the only thing. And it will just have a different flavor. So it's actually really cool. It's a really unique flavor that you probably haven't tasted before because it really doesn't exist anywhere else. The only thing is, so if you're making maple sap, we know that there's tons of water in the sap. So with maples, it's about 95% water. With birches, it's like 97% water. So almost everything coming out of that tree is water. And you have to spend a lot of time evaporating the water off and concentrating it down to get that, like the good stuff, the sugar and the minerals and the stuff that you're after. When it comes to maples, you can bring it to a rolling boil and the water's just flying off steam and it's getting your house all steamy, and it's a bit of a mess, but at least you can kind of get it done in a day. With the birch, you have to go a lot more slowly because the sugars in the birch will scorch and they'll burn. So you have to just bring it to like a very low simmer and leave it on your stove or in your slow cooker for the whole day. So you don't have to watch it as closely as the maple, but you have to put up with all of that steam in your house and the whole process for a little bit longer. So you just have to make sure the other people who use your kitchen are all right with that. So, I make it here at home a lot of the time, but then I give my husband all of the syrup, and so he's all right with me like taking over the kitchen for like a whole day at a time to boil it down. But the birch syrup is it's a really interesting flavor. It's kind of a little bit like molasses. It's kind of a little bit like if you took balsamic vinegar and you like reduced it down and made it syrupy, it would be that kind of flavor. Like there's something just a little fruitier about it. So yeah, it's cool. I believe people used to like ferment it and turn it into like a bubbly drink. Like there used to be like birch beer, the way there's root beer. So it would be like a pop kind of thing. So I think people did used to drink it a lot more, and it's just kind of fallen out of favor, and probably because it's kind of annoying a process you have to go through to try it. But if you have a weekend and you have a slow cooker, you can definitely get it to start boiling down and turning into syrup. It's just a little bit longer, which is why people don't tend to do it.
I'll put in there too that both birch and maple you can just drink straight out of the tree too. It's not going to have that like super sweet flavor or anything like that. In fact, it's going to taste like water, but all of the nutrients are still there. So you hear about people doing that sometimes just to
Yeah, I mean, you can buy sap online on like Amazon. It's very expensive. Like people will pay a lot of money for fresh sap if they live somewhere where they can't get access to it. So it's like a health drink that people really like.
There you go.
Yeah, but I will make some resources available as I'm going to start my boiling down this week. So I'll put together a little document that kind of outlines how to do it and how high a temperature you have to reach and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully people will have, a little bit of sap that they can try it at home too. But I just haven't had much luck with my trees until this week. So this week will be the week that I kind of put that little document together with some photos and some steps for you.
Perfect. And yeah, you'll find all of that on Flipgrid.
Yes.
All right. So upvoted, we have, what did you enjoy most about your post-secondary program? We'll start with Dayna.
Oh my God, there's so much of it. It was so long. So my post-secondary education, I did biochem in undergrad, and then med school, and then I did residency in internal medicine. I like the residency the best because that's the time where you get to see patients, you get to kind of learn on the fly. It's less sort of in the books as the rest of university is. You also get paid, so it's a nice bonus. But definitely residency for me was my favorite part of my education. It's kind of just the hands-on training that you get.
Awesome. Madison?
Yeah, I really liked the hands-on component of any of my schooling. So I went to Dalhousie for my undergraduate degree. So that was neuroscience at Dalhousie. And in the first year and a bit, It's kind of just everyone taking all the same courses in sciences, like everyone's taken a bunch of chemistries and biologies and what have you. And then toward the end of second year, it started to get a little bit more specific, and we started to actually do labs that were like more directly related to what I was interested in, which was the brain and how it works. So, you know, when I was in my third year, we got to do the neuroanatomy lab. We got to actually use human brains and dissect them and image them and do all that kind of stuff. And it was just really interesting. And it was what I had kind of signed up for when I joined in neuroscience at the beginning of my first year. So it kind of got off to a bit of a slow start, I felt. But in third year and fourth year, we started to do lots of really fun hands-on labs, and that's what I was really into, and you know, dissecting eyeballs and all that kind of stuff. I know that's not for everyone, but that was definitely for me. I thought it was super cool.
Awesome. We had a question in chat that only panelists or the three of us would be able to see, but someone just asked which flip grid to be looking at. So just as a FYI to the attendees, I've just put the quick link there to the life sciences flip grid. And I'll just say as well that we are this close to finishing our website, and it'll be a little less confusing. I do apologize. I know that Flipgrid is not the most user-friendly experience, which we will learn more about next month with UX and UI with Leslie Chard, who does user experience as her career within computer science. So we'll be learning about that, but to the point, the website will make it a little more user friendly. So thanks for sticking with us through this initial growth period. But moving on, the next upvoted one we have here is, do you do any volunteer work? We'll start with Madison this time.
I do, yeah, and sometimes it's directly related to what I do for my regular work, so it's like way to sort of share those skills. So I'm a member of the Social Justice Co-op of Newfoundland and Labrador, and so that's a grassroots organization in St. John's that promotes social justice across a wide range of issues. And of course, Manuels River is a conservation area, and a lot of what we do there is to try and teach sort of stewardship and give people an appreciation for the natural world. So I like to volunteer with the Social Justice Co-op on their initiatives around environmentalism. So they host various different events and different sort of, I guess, like town halls and things like that, where they can kind of engage with the community around ways that we can become a greener province and have a green transition to a new economy and all that kind of stuff. And all this is to say, I like to volunteer on those initiatives. Sometimes I show up and I bring kids activities. So if it's a adult panel that's going on, sometimes adults bring their kids, and then, you know, we can talk about that same issue. If we're talking about climate change, I can talk about that with the kids, and we can do some activities. And it's just a way to sort of engage them as well. So that's I guess it's all moved online since the pandemic. So it has really changed the way that I volunteer, but I like to stay active with that group and sort of bring some of my resources, some educational resources to the table there, which I think is, you know, kind of helpful and nice to share something that I do with people in that way.
Awesome. And how about yourself, Dayna?
Yeah, my volunteer work is also very linked to my job. I feel like I'm just working all the time, basically. So I volunteer with a med school and with kind of residency training. So we have a lot of changes kind of in our residency programs that are happening, and changes to our curriculum. And then this past weekend, I was doing a bunch of interviews for people coming to apply for residency. So all very time consuming, but also lovely to be on the other side. Generally what I've been doing lately. Yeah.
Nice. The next question is most specifically for you, Dayna, I would imagine, unless Madison has some hidden careers. Is the training for becoming a physician the same amount of time as a surgeon?
So it depends what type of physician. So the shortest program is family medicine. So basically all schools in Canada require that you have a 4-year undergraduate degree. And then after that, medical school is another 4 years. So you're at 8 at the least, and then you start a residency program. The shortest one is family medicine, which is 2 years. So 10 years is your shortest amount of time. Internal medicine is what I did, which is a 3-year program, but then you do a 2-year fellowship. So my total was 13 years. And that's basically the same for a surgeon, because after medical school, a surgery residency is 5 years as well. There are some surgeons that do a bit more training, like if they have a specific thing they want to operate on, if they have a very specific skill set that they're going to really work at, they may have additional years even after that 13 years. So depends what you want to do really, but most generalized things are a little bit shorter, but 10 years is kind of the shortest.
Yeah, one of my other pocket questions in here somewhere, I might not have copied it, was more about, is there ongoing training? So for you, if you don't decide to necessarily go back to school, do you still have to do upgrading?
Yeah, for sure. So we have something called the Royal College, which is just kind of an examining body. So before you start practicing as a physician, you have to be licensed. So you do an exam, which is, it's really just, it's half a written exam. And then the other part of it is a practical part which is related to patient care. After doing that exam and you start practicing, you still have to keep sort of a continuing medical education credit that you log. So those, and then there's a governing body that sort of watches and makes sure that every year you submit so many credits so that you're keeping up to date with your medical knowledge, because things change very quickly, obviously, in the medical field. So you do need to keep on top of a lot of things. So yes, definitely have to keep up your certifications. You have to keep up your, we call it CME, it's just continuing medical education every year. And you can do that by a lot of different ways. Like you can do online courses, you can do conferences, you can go to different rounds and teaching sessions that might be wherever you're working. There's lots of different ways to keep those credits up. But yeah, it's definitely lifelong that you'll be continuing to learn things.
And Madison, you've done your master's, if that's, yeah, I thought I was remembering correctly. So how long were you in school, and is there kind of any continued education that you're keeping up with?
Yeah, so I was 4 years in undergrad, and then I took some time off and I went back to do a master's, which took about 2.5. And that's pretty standard, I think. It's supposed to just take 2, but I think it takes most people about 2.5 or 3, and that's just the way it goes. But for people who want to get into science communication, a master's is definitely not necessary. There is a science communication master's program at Laurentian, which is where I did my master's degree. I didn't do that program, but that does exist out there if you sort of want some specific training in communication. They do some really cool stuff, like they teach you how to make videos and how to set up exhibits in science centers and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, generally speaking, you can sort of come to science education and outreach just with an undergraduate degree generally, or even sometimes we have people working for us that have, say, a college program in natural resource management. Those people are super knowledgeable about the natural world, and they make great tour guides and trail guides and interpretive guides and that type of thing. So it's something that people have very, very varied career paths when they come to work at a place like Manuels River or another science center or museum. Then once you get there, there's a lot of different directions that you can sort of take your professional development. So there is sort of a governing body or an overarching association of interpreters that's active in North America and also in Europe. And so there's all sorts of nowadays virtual, but conferences and training and things like that you can work at. So obviously, as COVID has come and changed the whole world, that's been really valuable to say, like, how can you transition your programs online? How can you reach people in the same meaningful way when you can't be with them in person? A lot of what we do is get people outside and get them connected to nature and get them thinking about the things, the stories that exist in the trees around us. And when you can't see the trees, it can be challenging. So, it's really valuable to have those professional associations that can reach out to you and say, like, okay, how can we make this work? What different technologies do we have? How can we, leverage our selfie sticks so that we're actually out in the woods talking about stuff, and getting really creative about it. It's also, I guess because we are teaching people, we have to be constantly learning new things ourselves, or our ability to engage people just kind of falls a little bit flat. So we do a lot of, we go to sort of free lectures. I used to spend a lot of time going to MUN for a lecture on oceanography, say, so that I could incorporate that type of information into a tour when we get to the ocean and people want to know about the research that's happening in the ocean. Well, I've recently been to this talk at MUN. I can tell you about it, right? So it's kind of all over the place, and it depends on what it is that you're really interested in, because when you're an interpreter and an educator, being excited about something is key. So you kind of get to direct your professional development toward whatever it is that you're really excited about.
Awesome. I think I might need to find out more information about that interpreter governing body. I didn't know about that one.
Yeah.
And I know there's so many associations out there, and definitely for anyone, I think you just need to get involved with the larger community that your career takes you in. So.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, we've got, are there many jobs in this province for someone with your education? So Madison.
Yeah, there's a lot when the tourism industry is doing well, which it was doing very well until COVID, and we do anticipate that it will recover. Presumably by the time all of you are done with school, we do expect it to recover by about 2023. Then there's lots of work for people who want to, teach people about the natural world. Jobs in national parks, at national historic sites, provincial parks, science centers, museums, those are all over. And the tourism industry is sort of, we anticipate that it's not going anywhere. It's going to grow. People love to travel. And we do have to adapt a little bit. As I said, there's been lots of ways that we've had to try and do that kind of on the fly, but definitely it's the kind of thing that you can find pretty much all over. And in this province in particular, there's some pretty cool places that you can work. We got some pretty cool national parks here, right? In Grossmoor and in Labrador, there's a couple of new parks that are opening that potentially are places where they're going to want interpreters, where they're going to want people who can, help visitors connect to the landscape around them. The landscape in Labrador is pretty remarkable, and not everyone knows how to interpret it or understand what it is that they're looking at. So yeah, I'd say there's lots and lots of opportunities for this type of work here.
Awesome. I'm excited about those parks in Labrador. So, bucket list. And Dayna, how many jobs do you think there are for you around here?
Depends. So there's so many jobs in medicine, but it really depends what you want to do in medicine. So if you want to do family medicine, you'll get a job immediately because you can kind of open up your own practice. People don't really talk about how family medicine is really a business of your own. It's a small business. So you would employ your secretary, you might employ a nurse practitioner to work with you. You'd be paying for your rental space. You'd be doing your billing, all that sort of stuff. So it really is a business. If you were interested in family medicine, that is something that as soon as you're done your training, you'll have a job kind of wherever you want to go. And that's probably how it's going to be forever, really, because we have an aging population, tons of people that need primary care physicians, just like their first point of access to the healthcare system. In terms of specialists and subspecialists, it can be a little bit more difficult, and it's really hard to predict if you're, 10 years out from being able to have a job. It's really impossible to know what the climate would be like at that point. Right now, things are okay for a general internist, which is what I do. So you would be able to get a job sort of in the hospital and have time to be on service admitting patients to hospital. But things are a little bit trickier if you have a very specific skill set. Like if you do something really specific, say you wanted to do head and neck surgery and you specifically operate on someone's vocal cords, there's not a whole lot for you to do in St. John's. So if that's your one true passion, St. John's is not the place it's going to be where you're working. But if you have something a bit more broad in mind, there's definitely lots of jobs in St. John's in medicine.
I feel like this ties into the next question of, did your degree offer many career path options? And that sort of speaks to that right there, is just how much is in medicine really. But maybe to take it back to your undergrad, did you feel like you had so many different options to pursue, or were you really like, oh my God, what's the next block of school I have to do?
For me, I guess when I started out, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew that I liked biology and I liked chemistry. So I did just general sciences initially. And then I ended up doing biochem just because I like bio and chem. It's as simple as that. And then within biochem, there are lots of lab type jobs. All those people you see making vaccines, they probably did biochem at some point. There are not a lot in St. John's though for that type of like bench science. So then I didn't really want to work in research. That wasn't really, I worked in a lab for a while in undergrad, but I really liked the idea of kind of being at someone's bedside, helping them through like a difficult time in their life. I really enjoyed kind of the detective work of medicine. So that's how I ended up going from biochem to med school. But like we sort of talked about a little bit, you don't have to start out with biochem. You could do music and get into med school. You can do French. I had people in my class who did business, people who did engineering. There's all kinds of things that you can do. And then if you're midway through it and you're like, actually, I think I really want to do medicine, there's really no undergrad that they're going to be like, oh, why did you do that? Like, if you are a person who can prove your interests and you are genuine in that, there's really no undergrad that will lead you astray. You can kind of do medicine with any undergrad. They require like a stats course and like some basic sciences courses before you start. And obviously having a science background makes things a little bit easier to start doing medicine. But everybody that was in my class who came from a background that wasn't science, they were just fine. So you can kind of do whatever you want and then apply to medicine.
Nice. And Madison, did your degree offer many career path options, either your master's or kind of same question, whether you were stuck at the end of your undergrad and said, I really need to do more school, or?
No, I wouldn't say that I had to go back to school. So when I finished my undergrad, I actually went to work with adults who have disabilities, and I went to work in recreation. So it wasn't really super related to what I had done in my undergrad. It was just something else that I thought was fun and interesting, and I really enjoyed it. But I just really felt the urge to go back and do my master's. I really wanted to get back into a lab, and so that just sort of, I found this really cool research opportunity advertised in that lab, and I was like, gee, that sounds great. So I kind of jumped into it. So I do think that most of the people in my cohort did sort of end up in very similar types of careers, but I think that kind of speaks more to the fact that when you pick your master's degree, you're just later in life and you've done a bit more exploring about the things that you're into. And so we were just a little bit more streamlined. Everyone who was doing conservation biology at Laurentian kind of ended up working for a nonprofit or a government in some sort of conservation work. So that I think there's probably a wide variety of things you could do. It's just that we were all there because that was what we were passionate about, was frogs and turtles and marmots and all that kind of stuff. And so then, we end up getting jobs with the Toronto Zoo and with the government of Ontario and all these other things. And I end up at Manuels River.
Nice. I'm just scanning because while upvoting is really cool, sometimes because I've added some what I call pocket questions, the questions directly from the girls end up at the bottom. So I'm just scanning to see whether we want to jump to one of their questions. Does your job offer much flexibility about where you live, and are you able to travel much with your career? Start with Madison.
I do not travel a whole lot with this job. But I did travel with my previous science outreach job. So before working for Manuels River, I worked for Science North, which is the large science center in Northern Ontario. And that's just the difference between working for a small nonprofit, really, and working for a large science center. So the Science North had a huge budget, and a huge part of what they did was in-person outreach at remote communities around Ontario. So I would drive all over, and I had a team with me in a van, and we would stay at all these little motels in all these little towns in Ontario, and we would put on science camps and demos and outreach and activities and stuff like that. And it was great. And we had a budget to fly people where they needed to go and all that kind of stuff. Now Manuels River it's much smaller than that. And our mandate there is to serve the community of CBS, which is, you know, considerably smaller and not quite as spread out. So we would still do like sort of outreach activities where I would maybe go to MUN because there's a science fair going on. But it wouldn't really be within our capacity to travel all over the place. So it just kind of depends on what type of organization you're working for. There are definitely some really big science centers and big museums and big organizations whose job it is to go out there and make science happen in person for people. And then certainly you get to do lots of traveling. And I had a ton of fun working for Science North.
Sounds pretty cool. And there's so many different jobs like that for sure. I've heard of a lot of great little traveling jobs that I kind of wish I had done like right out of undergrad for sure. But here we are doing other things. How about you, Dayna?
Well, there's tons of opportunity. You could live wherever you wanted and travel wherever you wanted in medicine. My job in particular is a little bit more limited because I'm a specialist. So most specialists live in a place where you have a wide referral base. So I get referrals from family doctors. So generally subspecialists would live in a larger center or specialists would live in a larger center. But if you wanted to be a transplant surgeon and fly and harvest organs and fly back, that is something you could do. Lots of travel involved. If you wanted to be a family doctor and work out of Nunavut, that's something that you could do. You could fly, you could do very like small flights to small communities and practice there. Like you can basically do anything that you want within medicine. My travel is basically just for conferences, which sounds very boring next to something else, but there's tons and tons of opportunities for really to do whatever you want within medicine. If you want to live in a tiny town, if you want to live somewhere really rural, if you want to live in a huge city, if you want to do something really specific or really generalized, like there's an option with whatever you could think of really.
Idea that conferences are boring. Yeah, they're amazing.
I love conferences, but like it's on the boring reasons for travel if you're in medicine.
They can be a bit dry sometimes.
But you still get your evenings or whatnot. You usually have some time to play around in a new city. And with that, I'd also recommend to the girls that they get involved with societies. I did a lot of travel in my undergrad through society groups. So I was involved with like the United Nations Society, for example, and went to like 5 different cities in 5 different years. But that's not the only one. That's not to say like go get in that society. That's, I feel like the purpose of societies practically is to just, go around and explore the world a little bit. So that's been my experience anyway. I'm going to group these kind of next 3 questions because they're all kind of related here. They're all med school based, but I think we can easily adjust them. So it's, if you were to go back and choose a different medical career, what would you choose? But what career would you choose in general? If you, for Madison as well, if you went back and did a different career within the same degree that you did you immediately go into med school or your master's after you finished your undergrad? And do you think it's more beneficial to stay in the province for your undergrad or go to a more well-known school? So I know that's a lot. I can kind of refresh as we go. Maybe I should have separated them, but we'll see how we do.
All right. So if I could go back and do anything else within medicine, or anything in life in general, I probably would have just opened a doggy daycare, to be honest, if I wasn't in science at all. But now that we're doing science, so within medicine, I probably, if I had to change, would do anesthesia probably. Just because it's very similar to medicine in that you kind of have a lot of control. There's a lot of medications involved. There's a lot of physiology involved, a lot of figuring out how the normal patient, the normal sort of biology is supposed to work versus the pathology that a person might have. So those are very relatable. And some days, like in internal medicine, I see patients and I see them kind of at their worst. And there's a lot of like family involvement, a lot of sort of social stressors, trying to get people discharged from hospital and that sort of thing. So some days I'm like, if it's just an anesthetist, I could put somebody to sleep, get them through their surgery, wake them up, and then that was it. So some days I do wonder if anesthesia would have been like maybe a great choice, but I don't regret doing internal medicine. Going as for my path, I went directly to med school after my undergrad, but there's tons of people that do a master's first, or some people did a PhD first. Lots of people did nursing and were nurses, or did pharmacy and worked as a pharmacist, or were an engineer and did that for a while. So there's all kinds of different paths. There's really no one thing. What was the last question again? Sorry.
Do you think it's more beneficial?
Oh, to stay here or go elsewhere?
Yeah, to stay here or go to a more well-known school. How much does that matter?
That is a good question. Staying here is financially a wonderful decision. Because you probably have a lot more support if you're from here. You may be able to live at home for a little bit during your undergrad, which is obviously much cheaper. And then matching, like getting into a medical school, like from Memorial, you're probably statistically a little easier for you to get into med school at Memorial if you did your undergrad at Memorial, just because people kind of know you. I don't think that going for MUN medical school, I don't think that going away and doing an undergrad gives you an advantage over somebody else. Going away for medical school after undergrad, I think it's good to get experiences in different places. I went away for my fellowship. I don't think that ultimately in the end of all of it that it matters. Like when I look at my colleagues, do I consider if they went to Dal for their undergrad or if they went to Western for their residency or whatever? We don't like at the end of all of it, it doesn't really matter. Sometimes it's just good to get another experience though. Like if you've just been in St. John's your whole life and you want to go away and have that like I'm away from home type of situation, then that's maybe worth it to you.
Yeah, and to talk more about like the idea of associations or just your larger community of colleagues, getting to know people from elsewhere, whether in Canada or whether around the world, like that can be helpful too. I think in any career at all, just having a different or a broader community to draw upon. But you can get that in multiple ways, obviously through these associations or from going to school elsewhere. Yeah. So Madison, if you were to choose a different career based on the education you have or the education that you wish you had, we'll start there. And then whether we already know you did take a break between your undergrad and your master's. And then the final question, I don't know if you have anything to add there of whether it's beneficial at all to move around to do your schooling.
Right. Wait, sorry, what was the first question? Would I redo it? Yeah, so I think it would be really cool, really fascinating to be a museum curator, to work at a natural history museum and to work a little bit more on that side of things, sort of keeping track of all the resources and cataloging everything. And you can do a little bit more research as a curator. I don't have a research function at all at my job now. And that was something that kind of came to my attention when I was about halfway through my master's. So I was doing my master's at Laurentian University in conjunction with the Toronto Zoo. So I was using the live animals at the Toronto Zoo as my research subjects. But then I was also looking at historical collections, like pelts and bones from animals that were kept in collections at different museums. And I really, really enjoyed using those resources and communicating with people all across North America to get these samples to try and sort of tell this story about the Vancouver Island marmot. And so that was about midway through that I kind of realized like what a cool resource museums are and what cool research can happen in a museum. And I was kind of all in on the zoo, and about halfway through, I was like, I would never work at a zoo, actually. I always thought a zoo would be a sweet job, and now I don't want to do this at all. And so I kind of always had that in the back of my mind of like, I do sort of science education and outreach now, and pivoting toward becoming a curator at a science museum wouldn't be a huge leap, I don't think. And so that's kind of always in the back of my mind as like a cool next career step, maybe, is get back a little bit into the research and using collections in that kind of way, I think would be really cool. In terms of moving around. So I myself like to move around a lot. So I've always sort of appreciated using educational opportunities as a reason to travel and to go new places and have new experiences. So when I was doing my undergrad, I took time to do an exchange program. So the neuroscience program at Dal has an exchange with the university in the Netherlands. So you can get all the same credits that you need. You can graduate on time. You don't have to worry about like fooling anything up, but you get to go and do those credits in the Netherlands. And that was a really incredible experience to live with all these international students and meet these people and learn about neuroscience from the perspective of Europeans who have a whole different way of looking at it. And we had a whole different way of learning. They didn't do lectures the way that we do. They did small group activities all the time. So it was really, really fascinating. And similarly, when it was time to do a master's, that was a good time for me to be living outside of Nova Scotia. So I went to Dal, I grew up in Nova Scotia. It wasn't super far away. So when it came time to do a master's, it's like, okay, I need to go elsewhere and have a new experience and check out Northern Ontario, which I probably never would have really gone to or bothered to investigate at all. and I had a great time there. So I think it's really a great way to try and learn more about the world, see more about the world, and expand your educational opportunities.
Awesome. We got about 10 minutes left. So before, I know some people might take off rather quickly. People tend to have things on the go on the hour. So I'm just going to launch that poll that I talked about at the beginning about the promotional items or swag. So it's just, I'll launch that and then I will ask some more questions. So while the students are going through that poll, we can still have a chat, and there's like 20 different options. It's separated into questions because I had to do it that way. Just, you can pick as many as you like. And yeah, no promises of what you'll receive, but just a quick way to get your input about what things maybe you do want. So we know that it's not just like headed to the garbage straight away. All right, so the last, well, maybe not last, we'll see how many questions we can get in, but we've got 3 here kind of related again. Sorry to do this to you a second time, but they are closer related this time. So are the courses you take of getting your master's undergrad, are they separate or are they the same? Like, does your undergrad and master's overlap? Which my understanding is that they're separate, but we'll see what your experience has been. And then, are there courses that you wish you took during high school, and or the courses that you took in high school, did they benefit you in university? Madison, I think you're first up this time.
Yeah, so when I was in high school, we had some advanced placement classes, which involved a specific curriculum out of the United States, and you have to then write exams. And if you get a certain level on those exams, you can transfer them for credit in university. And when I went to Dal, they would only let me get one of them as credited. But I found that taking those classes in my final year was really helpful because it helped me to develop some study skills that I really needed when I got to university. So my other classes in high school, I didn't really need those same study skills. And I had a lot of friends who got to university who had taken classes in high school that didn't require them to have much in the way of study skills either. And they found that transition in first year really, really challenging as they tried to learn how to study and figure out how to study. Because I think the way that you're taught in university is quite different from the way you're taught in high school. That was my experience for sure. Just big classes and lots of information coming at you, and you're expected to do a lot of learning and reading on your own, a lot of independently directed work. And so taking these sort of advanced classes where there was an expectation that we were doing that, I think when I took an AP Bio, we had to teach ourselves a whole unit over the summer, because that was the only way we could get all the material covered. So that made it, you know, grade 12 kind of challenging, but I think it made first year university a little simpler. Now, that being said, I would have loved to have taken like some geography in high school. I think I would have like really enjoyed that, and I would have then been led into more like biogeography when I got into university, and I find that kind of stuff really fascinating now, and I feel like that was a missed opportunity for me. But yeah, you know, I was just all in on the biology and chemistry, and that was what I was keen on. So there's only so many hours in a day. I also found paying a lot of attention in high school math was very helpful, because again, the way they teach math in university is, I think, just more challenging than the way they teach it in high school. So at least once I got to university, I was like, I kind of remember this from last year. I'm so glad I was in a class of 20 kids when I learned it, and then got to university with a class of like 100. It just made it so much easier. Was there a second question? Oh, overlap between a master's and an undergrad. So generally, if you're doing a research-based master's, you're finding a supervisor who wants to take you on, and you're doing just a large independent research project, and you don't do a whole lot of coursework at all. So it's essentially, you have to be able to convince that person that you know enough about whatever it is they studied that you can go and work with them. So I had done a neuroscience undergrad, and you know, we had studied hormones and animal behavior and physiology and all that sort of thing. So when I went to do my research project on stress physiology in animals, I could show that, you know, I had learned about this in school, so I should be able to undertake this research project. And my supervisor was like, great, that sounds awesome. So I think really the only like thing you really need to do in your undergrad, if you think you want to go to grad school, is you have to have the honors level project. So when you get to your fourth year, if there's an honors stream that's available for your degree, you sort of have to do that honors project, and that just means you write a big paper or you do a big research project in your fourth year, because that's what the graduate schools are looking at, to see that you did that, because that shows that you have some capacity to take on a research project and that you'll be able to successfully do a master's. So if you want to do any sort of research-based grad school, I think you just want to make sure you get that honors piece done. And I know people that kind of went and did their undergrad and they just did their regular 4-year degree or a 3-year degree, and then realized later they wanted to go to grad school and they had to go back and get that honors piece. So that's kind of the stumbling block, really. And other than that, yeah, you just have to find someone whose research interests align with your own, and figure out where your skills match up with that, and the project kind of takes off from there.
Perfect. And Dayna, high school courses that benefited you, that you wish you had done?
I would sort of echo what Madison said. I think that doing AP courses is helpful. Sometimes the credits never transfer over for whatever reason, depending what university you go to, but just having that background knowledge, especially for calculus and like those types of things where you're going in, you're like, oh, it's going really fast. I can't even really see what this person is writing on this board. It's kind of helpful to have that background. And if you sort of develop those study habits before kind of getting thrown into university, that can just be helpful to ease your transition. There weren't any courses in particular that I felt really prepared me or like made my life so much better for undergrad. I think if you're interested in doing a science undergrad, doing some AP science courses is reasonable. If you're interested in doing an arts undergrad, probably not in the STEM session, but if you're interested in doing arts, maybe doing AP English or something like that might be helpful for you. What else? In terms of like undergrad, how undergrad is laid out, basically you get whatever degree program you decide to choose, they will have an outline of courses that you have to do, and they will give you credit for that. And you have to get a total number of credits to get a degree. So a certain amount of those credits will be required things that you have to take to get that degree, but other things will be sort of things courses you can choose just to get you to that number of total credits to get an undergrad degree. And then master's, like Madison said, is not related. It's not a carryover type of thing. You don't do courses in your undergrad that can then give you points really towards your master's, sadly. And then med school is sort of the same way. It's just a bunch more courses that you have to take to get a certain number of credits to get a degree.
And I feel like I'm drawing back to this community thing again, but just as Madison said, lining up with a supervisor too, right? Having that, if you do end up at the same university, if you did your undergrad at MUN and then you do a master's at MUN, knowing who you work well with, because you'll be working closer with that professor during your master's. So just kind of having that sense, and it doesn't have to be like at the same university, but you can even ask around during your undergrad, like around that department, like who do they think at McGill you might, want to connect with. So just building that sense of community and knowing who's out there, who's doing what research that you're interested in, and you'll get there. By the time you're in 4th year undergrad, this will be just like common knowledge to you, but just to give you a sense of what's coming, I suppose. Hey, what can we tackle in the last kind of 3 minutes?
Another thing that I found really good in undergrad is that NSERC gives grants that you can do, like you can get paid to do research. That can be really helpful if you want to do an honors or you want to do a master's, just to get a sense of working in a lab and what sort of what project you might want to work at some point. And you also get paid for a summer to do it. So that can be nice.
Yeah, that's how I got started in a lab in my second year.
Same.
Undergraduate Research Student Award.
Yes.
How about this one? This is a nice one to end on. What is your favorite aspect of your job? What do you look forward to when you go into work every day?
I'm starting this one.
Oh, sorry. I think it's Dayna's turn to start.
My favorite thing is definitely patient care. I just like interacting with people. I like sort of figuring out what's their issue, like what is causing them to feel unwell, and attempting to sort it out for them and then coming up with a treatment plan. I also like the patient education aspect a lot. There's a lot we can do to sort of empower people if they know about their condition so that they can have a voice in their care and be kind of involved in their care, and that leads to better outcomes. So my favorite thing is just kind of interaction with patients, definitely.
Awesome.
Yeah, I really like that my job lets me be really creative. So coming up with like programs and lesson plans and having like sort of some outline of, this group is coming and they want to learn about bats, and here's how old they are, and here's how many there are, and here's the, tools you have at your disposal. Like, how are you going to learn about bats in the next hour? And it's just really fun to constantly be sort of remixing our programs and coming up with new ways to do it. And, we're always on Pinterest looking for a cool craft, and is that appropriate for 5-year-olds, because we've got a group of 5-year-olds now, and trying to just figure out like and what level are 5-year-olds at to learn about bats, because sometimes your group is just at the level of like, bats are cool, and that's all we're getting out of this today, and bats exist, right? Because I'm 5 and I've never heard of them before, and then you have to scale it all the way up because you've got a group of youth that's coming, you got a group of scouts that's coming, and they're going to build bat houses, and like, oh, okay, that's a whole other level of connecting with the subject matter. But it's just, we're constantly coming up with new things and sort of recalibrating the way that we do things, and it's never a dull moment. Sometimes we fly by the seat of our pants and we get a little bit like stressed because we're like, what are we doing? I thought there was only 6 kids coming and now there's 12. And so, you have to be flexible, but it's definitely like, it's always something fun.
Amazing. Well, that's our time today. Thank you both so much. And thanks to all the students for joining us. Thanks to the students for doing the poll. Hopefully we'll be able to get you some of that swag for the conference. And if you have other ideas of what you would like to receive as swag that might not have been on the list, or like I said, we're also looking for ideas for prizes, so little more costly items perhaps that we could intrigue you with, then those are things we're looking for. You can get at us on Flipgrid by texting that number. It's 709-300-1214. And or you can email me at stemforgirls@wrdc.ca. Madison has her information up on Flipgrid, her little video, so you can ask her more questions there, and she's doing her maple tapping throughout this month, and I'm sure probably into April, honestly, because we're almost there. So we just need to get up the stuff on making syrup, and as you have questions, then we'll certainly let Madison know that your questions are on Flipgrid about that. And I still need to get Dayna's profile up on there, but I'm sure if you have any questions for Dayna about med school, you could email me and I'll forward it to her as well, and we'll try to get you those questions answered. And lastly, I've been trying to remind everyone about the bulletin board on Flipgrid, and we're trying to figure out the best ways to go about letting everyone know, letting all our members know about events. So I don't know if this system is currently working for you. We are, like I said, improving it with a new website coming soon. But until then, please keep checking the bulletin board. And I know that there's some more events coming up externally that I've just been posting between Let's Talk Science or Brilliant Labs, those sorts of organizations, to let you know more about STEM things, because we can't do it all ourselves as much as we try. And with that, I think I will let these lovely women go and see you all soon, hopefully.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thanks. Bye.